Hello there. My name is Kevin Kendall. I'm a 20-year history and social studies teacher in Tennessee. Today's video will be about Tennessee State Standard for 6th grade social studies, standards 6.39 and 6.40. This video can be used for a snow day lesson like the one I'm using it for today, a classroom lesson, or a supplementary at-home study lesson. Feel free to share this video, like and subscribe. I intend to cover all of the Tennessee State Standards for 6th grade and other grades. At the end of this lesson, I will give a brief breakdown of the standards. Additionally, I'll show examples of state testing questions that students may see at the end of the school year. I'll also post a link to assignments that can supplement learning for these standards. So when I do my lessons, I always put off a spiral review, kind of spiraling back to other lessons that we've done before, touching on other standards. The one that you see on the screen right now kind of talk about the rivers. The one that's covered up says what are the two main rivers in China. So you can pause this and use this in your class and have your students write the answers down, or if you're using this at home to study, you can go ahead and pause this and answer these on your own, just kind of as a throwback to lessons that you've already had this year. So I always start off with a head scratcher, kind of sets the pace and gets the students' brains working towards what we're going to be doing. So our head scratcher today was, what geographic advantages do we have in East Tennessee? Now you can use this, anybody can use this. You can use this for if you're in Georgia, if you're in New York, whatever, but I'm primarily talking about Tennessee state standards, although these match up with other states. So I'm in Northeast Tennessee, and so my students would answer this question because it's home for them. So what will you use? How will you know you're successful? So in order to know you're successful, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain how the geographical advantages of ancient Greece, including the mountainous terrain and access to the Mediterranean Sea, caused them to organize into city-states, become sea traders, and go start colonies in other places in the Mediterranean. That sets up right with the standards. Essential question: how did the geography of Greece affect the development of their civilization? So that's really the point of what this lesson, either as a classroom lesson or as a study lesson at home. So that's what we're going to be doing. So what are we doing? We're examining the geographical features and how the Greeks used those features to their advantage. Why are we doing this? Well, for one thing, these are Tennessee State tested standards. Most of what you're going to do in the classroom is going to be standards based. Almost all of it. Sometimes you'll have other things that you're doing that goes with it, but almost everything you're going to be doing in class is standards based. Now, we don't teach to the test, but the Tennessee has decided what they think is the most important things for you to learn in 6th grade social studies. So another reason we're doing this is understanding the geographical features will help us understand the ancient Greeks' advancements and actions. So standard 6.39, identify and locate geographical features of ancient Greece, including the following: Asia Minor, the Mediterranean Sea, Athens, the Peloponnesian Peninsula, Macedonia, and Sparta. We always start my classes off, each time we do a civilization, we always start off with maps. We're always doing the geography first. And so this is no less. So this will be the first part of what we're doing in Greece. So very simple. The entire standard will be answered by studying this map. So the first thing you're going to look at is Asia Minor, right here. Now Greece, ancient Greece, is located in both continents, Europe and Asia. Actually, the continents separate right here. And so this is Asia Minor, what we know of today as Turkey. So right here, this whole sea is the Mediterranean Sea. The Ionian Sea and the Aegean Sea are part of the Mediterranean Sea, which is the largest sea on Earth. Here is the Peloponnesian Peninsula. This is important because Athens and Sparta are located on the Peloponnesian Peninsula. Then you're going to have the Balkan Peninsula, which is the rest of Greece. And at the very top, kind of on the frontier, is Macedonia. The Greeks didn't always consider the Macedonians Greek, but obviously when we start to talk about Alexander the Great, and Philip, we're going to talk about Macedonia, part of the ancient Greeks. So this entire standard can be done by studying this map. I always have my students do a map where they color it and draw so that they could see it. There is a significant deficiency in 6th grade students when it comes to reading maps, charts, graphs, and timelines. So we always do a map. Standard 640. Analyze how the geographical features of ancient Greece, including its mountainous terrain and access to the Mediterranean Sea, contributed to its organization into city-states, role in maritime trade, and colonies in the Mediterranean. This is all very self-explanatory. However, the Greeks are very different than when we talked about the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Sumerian, with the Sumerians and the Assyrians, and it's different from what we talked about in India and China. The Greeks are much different. So ancient Greece, we're going to talk about 800 BC to 300 BC. You'll notice on many of these presentations that I do, sometimes I'll say BC, sometimes I'll say BCE. I don't really like BCE. I've never thought that was necessary. BC is what most of the world uses, so we know that time period is before the birth of Christ. Here's ancient Greece. So this is a satellite image. You can clearly see the Peloponnesian Peninsula and the Balkan Peninsula. Location. Greece is located in southeastern Europe. Tennessee is located in southeastern United States. If you take a big map of Europe, which is right here, of course my big head is blocking, but Greece is right here. The Greek civilization developed on Greek mainland, the Aegean Islands, and the west coast of Anatolia, which is Turkey, or as we've already talked about, Asia Minor. Here is an excellent satellite image of everything we're talking about. So right here is Asia. This is Asia Minor or Turkey. Right here is Europe. So here's the Peloponnesian Peninsula, the Balkan Peninsula, Macedonia is right up in here. And you see, the entire area is surrounded by the ocean. It's going to make a huge impact on their development, just as the desert had a huge impact on not only the Mesopotamians, but also the Egyptians. Islands. Many islands in the Aegean and Ionian Sea, approximately 1,400 islands. You could sail from Greece to Turkey without ever losing sight of land. That's a huge deal. For one thing, it gave them confidence. It gave them confidence to go out on these oceans because you were always in sight of land. If you watch the Disney movie Moana, they didn't know what was beyond their island. They were scared. But in the ancient Greeks, they could sail from mainland Greece all the way to Asia Minor, and you never lost sight of land. That was a huge confidence boost for them. The Greek mainland is a mountainous peninsula. Peninsula is an area of land surrounded on 3 sides by water. Mountainous is very important. These areas that we've talked about before with the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were not very mountainous. We know that mountains do what? Mountains separate people. They were also surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Ionian Sea, all part of the Mediterranean. You can see here's another map of them, kind of a clearer map. You're going to see, the reason I have this on there for you students who are using this as a supplemental learning thing, you're going to see different types of maps on your end of the year test. Sometimes they'll be grayscale, sometimes they'll be topographical maps, sometimes they'll look just like this. Get used to seeing it. I always tell my students, look for the mouth of the Nile. If you find the mouth of the Nile, you can find anything. We know that's Egypt. Right over here is going to be Israel and Mesopotamia. Right down to the right, down this way, is going to be Mesopotamia. So right up from the mouth of the Nile is going to be the Greeks. And if you look across here, here's where the Romans are going to be. Mountains cover about 3/4 of ancient Greece. That's a huge deal. It divided the land into different regions. Unlike Mesopotamia and Greece and India and in Canaan, these city-states that develop will be divided. The ancient Greeks were not a united people. They were not a united empire until toward the very end, when the Macedonians took over. You have these city-states will compete with each other just like in Mesopotamia. They were not friends. They were competitors. It made it difficult to unite because of the mountains. Travel was difficult. You have to go over mountains, and they did not have roads and airplanes or helicopters. They had to walk. And so you're going to have these different city-states will develop different personalities, as it were. Now, what united them? They're going to be united by their religion. They're going to be united by their language. But after that, they're pretty different. Beautiful view of Greece. I've never been there. My brother's been there. It says it's fantastic. Two of my brothers have been there. Another map, seeing the coastlines. Greek coastline had many natural harbors. Now, what's that important for? A natural harbor is important because you can get these ships. You can build ships that can get real close to the land for shipping and trade. It encouraged seafaring and trade. So you look, here's another. You can tell how the deep water comes right up to the coast. Just unbelievable. It almost doesn't even look real, the beauty of Greece. Here's another map, a satellite map of what we're talking about. Southern Greece is dry and rocky then as it is now. It had limited rainfall, thin topsoil. So you're going to see different views, southern Greece there. Why do you students think they had all these settlements right near the beach? Right, so they can go fishing, so they can get food and protein. Here's some old ruins. They had small, fertile valleys separated by mountains. So what you're going to have is just like in Mesopotamia, just like in Canaan, just like with the Indus, you're going to have city-states. You're going to have a relatively large city, usually surrounded by walls, but you're going to have the surrounding farmlands. And each of these areas are going to have their own farmland, but the population for ancient Greece was not very big. They didn't have as much farmland as Egypt and Mesopotamia. It was good for farming, but it was limited. Limited food supply could not sustain a large population. So what do you students think? How did they get their food if they could not grow as much as they needed? Right, they got their food by fishing or by trading for it. Who do we know that had a surplus of food? We know the Egyptians had a surplus of food. Very good. They had a diet based off grains, olives, and grapes. Here's some olive groves. That's a very interesting video. If you ever want to watch a video on YouTube or Rumble, check out how they make olive oil or how they grow olives. Pretty interesting. Here's some fertile valleys. Still, that's obviously a color picture. That's a modern picture. Still using it for farmland. Look at that. Beautiful. So the effects of their geography. The coastline and seas led Greeks to become expert seafarers and sailors. That is a huge part of their culture. It's going to be part of their religion too. Mountainous terrain made it difficult to unify the people. They had these different city-states that grew up and were individually powerful, but they didn't always get along. It led to the development of isolated city-states. A political unit that includes a town or city and the surrounding farmland. We've talked about that before. But the Greek word for a city-state is a polis. And so that's Greek for city-state or large city. And we see that, you see that in modern day cities. Annapolis, Maryland, Minneapolis, Minnesota. What about in Superman? Superman lives in Metropolis. So that's where that comes from. The polis means city or town. It's a Greek name for a city-state. People were loyal to their city-state. Just like in Mesopotamia, unlike in Egypt, where they were only loyal to the pharaoh, they were loyal to their individual city-states. And like I said, they competed. They were not united. And this led to colonization. This is the first time we've heard the word colonization. You're going to hear it again later in the 7th grade, and you're going to hear it big time in the 8th grade. A colony is when you go out and you assert your government on an area that's not naturally native to you. So if you're in Athens and you go out and you start a colony in Africa, they're going to be ruled by you, and you're going to do this through treaty or through fire or through warfare. So that's what a colony is when you have your government on a foreign land. Lack of good farmland and natural resources led Greeks to trade throughout the Mediterranean and establish new colonies. This led to cultural diffusion. We talked about cultural diffusion when we talked about Egypt. Cultural diffusion means you're spreading your culture to another area, either by warfare, through trade, through writing, whatever. And the Greeks went everywhere. They went all the way as far as Great Britain. These are thousands of miles away, but look what they're staying. They're staying right on the coast. So you're going to see a huge spread of Greek culture all throughout the Mediterranean world, throughout the Middle Eastern world, throughout the North African world. Ancient Greeks, geography and early Greeks, key terms would be polis, and then you have the Acropolis. The Acropolis is the town square or the center of town where you have a lot of the merchants, or you may have a defensive fortress. That's the city, the center of town where most of the men would go and talk about politics. The geography of Greece. Greece is located in Europe. Greece is a peninsula with many smaller peninsulas branching off the mainland. Greece is also made up of many islands. Much of Greece is dominated by mountains that run right down into the sea. Rocky coasts made farming difficult, and it made their people isolated from one another. Trade with Greece. Greeks took to the sea for transportation and communication. The Greeks became skilled shipbuilders and sailors. As the Greeks traveled, they found sources of food and other products they needed to survive. How is the way the Greeks found food to survive different from the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and Indians? Right, that's going to be, they're going to find a lot of their food on the sea with fishing, but they're also going to find their food through trade. They're going to go out and trade things that they have and they create with these other civilizations that had a surplus. What's a surplus? Surplus is extra. Here's the Acropolis. Here's a Greek city-state. That looks like that's going to be Corinth or Athens. The Minoans. The Minoans were the first culture to grow up in Greece to develop. It was developed on the island of Crete. If we go back, well, we have to go forward, but if we go back, Crete is the big island south of the Greek mainland. It developed on the island of Crete. The Minoans traded wood, olive oil, pottery for copper, gold, silver, and jewels. But their culture collapsed. We think their culture collapsed from an earthquake, which led to a huge tidal wave. The Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans were the first people to actually speak Greek. The Mycenaeans built fortresses all over the Greek mainland. They were aggressive and often attacked other kingdoms to get what they needed from them. The Mycenaeans' culture declined when earthquakes destroyed their city. So you're going to have other Greek city-states. You're going to have Athens, Corinth, Sparta, Agros. After the Mycenaeans fell, the Greeks began to join together for protection. They formed polis or city-states. A city-state is a political unit that consists of a city and the surrounding countryside. Life in the city-state. Life in the city-state were built around strong fortresses called the Acropolis. The most famous Acropolis is going to be in Athens. It's still there. Obviously, these are color pictures. The town around the Acropolis was surrounded by walls for protection. Life in the city was focused around the marketplace, or the agora, where goods were sold, meetings were held, religious assemblies took place. They also had theater. Most of this was for men. Most Greek women stayed at home. City-state residents were expected to take part in their government. That's something new. Greek and city-states traded olives, wine, copper, and iron. They began to colonize other parts of Greece. Greeks became worried and curious and began to branch out all over Europe. Some cities around the Mediterranean Sea that exist today began as Greek colonies. These cities include Istanbul, Marseille, and Naples. And they became rich through trade. So here's a trade map that you see all coming out Greece, and Greece is such a small area and became fabulously wealthy through trade. A lot of their entire culture was based off the ocean. So the impact. The mountainous topography and many islands created unique subcultures within the Greek Empire. There wasn't really a Greek Empire yet. It was really a bunch of Greeks going out and having colonies, but they were not united yet. Each polis or city-state had their own government. Governments varied with the needs of the people, their culture, and their history. These city-states will also have their own military. They'll have their own patron god, which we'll talk later about the Greek religion. Most students find the Greek gods super fascinating. So, recapping. Why did the Greeks depend heavily on trade? How many islands did they have? Why was trade hard for the Greeks? Why was it hard for the Greeks to unite? And what was a polis? So I'll give you about a minute or so to go ahead and answer those questions. Oh, here's another one. Why did they need colonies? So how many islands? There's about 1,400 islands. Why did the Greeks depend heavily on trade? Well, they had many harbors, and they were not always able to get what they needed from their own land. Number 3, why was it hard for the Greeks to unite? It was hard for the Greeks to unite because of all the mountainous terrain. Mountains block people. Mountains separate people. What was a polis? A polis was a Greek city-state. And why did they need colonies? Well, they need colonies because they needed to get other things that they needed, and they needed to get it from other areas. So next is a couple examples of questions you'll see on the TCAP. Here there are 2 maps here of modern and ancient Greece. After comparing the maps, what conclusion can be made about the influences of the era? What influenced the era? Obviously what influences the era is the fact that they lived on the sea. Many of their city-states were on the sea, and even today they are. Here's another one. This map shows the early city-states of ancient Greece. What conclusions can be made about the development of Greek city-states from the map? That's an easy one too. Very similar question. They all formed near the sea. Here's a couple questions for you. About 640, how did geography impact the development of the ancient Greek civilization? It definitely helped. It slowed the creation of a unified government. We've talked about that many times on this. It just made it hard for them to unite because of the mountains. How did the geography of ancient Greece impact the development of the region? Mountain valleys divided the Greek communities into city-states, very similar to the question above, similar types of questions. Those are the type of questions you're going to see on your TCAP or whatever end of the year thing you're studying. All right, there we go. That's my very first standards-based video. I hope it was helpful to you. If it's helpful to you, watch it again. If you think it'll help your class, use it. I just want to help. Teachers are the best thieves, so if you're a teacher, go ahead and take this video and do whatever you need to do with it. In the comment section or below the video, I'm going to post assignments that I'd use with my students that will go with these 2 standards. I generally will test these 2 standards together. It just makes it much easier. All right, I think that's all I have. So what I tell my students after every lesson is go forth and learn, because knowledge is power.